Hello and welcome back to the Police podcast. My name is Aspen,
And mine is Mariah.
and today we're here after episode 4, which talked a little bit about how police brutality is often racially motivated, and we looked at how police brutality disproportionately impacts people of color, and a little bit about implicit bias and how that impacts people. Today we're here to talk about potential solutions to the issue of police brutality and to just kind of wrap up our entire podcast. So if you haven't watched the last 4 episodes, go ahead and do that.
So why do we need police reform? The police system as a whole is built on a history of racism and using violent force. They've been trained this way and using these methods for decades.
Large overhaul reform of the police system is necessary to change systemic practices that are strongly ingrained into the foundation of the institution. Change doesn't just come about organically for something like this that's so intertwined with the system. Police have been using violent force since they were first created and have always been taught to do so. And police have always been taught to mobilize against people of color forever.
Police officers in the United States are not receiving adequate training, especially when it comes to resolving conflict in a peaceful manner. What training are these police receiving? Less than a year of training. Average is around 6 months, and this is not enough time to adequately prepare someone for the situations police are placed into. In other countries, police officers are required to get a degree and required to go through programs that span multiple years of extensive training.
Especially in situations where police claim that they could not restrain somebody with a knife or another small weapon, or especially an unarmed person. They need more training until they are able to do so. This is especially true in cases where police have killed children. They need to be able to restrain children and non-violent people in a non-violent manner.
Police need to come to terms with the dangerous nature of their jobs and be trained thoroughly on how to stay calm in stressful situations.
Similarly, police need to be trained on sensitivity surrounding race and disabilities. If police have preconceived notions about race, this can be very dangerous for people of color. And similarly, if police do not understand disabilities or do not know how to handle someone with a disability, this can also be very dangerous. This is why having a trained community official enter the situation was really helpful. And we see that actually in case studies in the United States and across the world. In Eugene, Oregon, for example, mental health providers respond to mental health calls instead of police. Also in Los Angeles County, co-responder teams of mental health providers and police jointly respond to extreme mental health related calls. And an analysis by the Sheriff's Department in LA estimated that this program actually prevented as many as 751 use of force incidents and 9 killings by police in 2018. So these systems of having mental health crisis experts respond to mental health crises is actually way more effective than having police respond.
Police are specifically trained to shoot to kill in order to avoid personal injury lawsuits. If a cop is shooting you, they are almost always aiming to kill you. This is not okay. Police are taught very strongly to never snitch on their comrades. Good cops can't even do anything in a system like this.
Less than 1% of police officers are punished when they commit brutality like this, and many police stations don't have to report rates of brutality at all. Many police stations that do skew the data by omitting certain cases from the reports. And so because of this, it's so easy for police to hide their actions and avoid accountability altogether. So this just allows them to continue what they're doing. So what are some potential solutions to this issue?
A potential solution can be sending out mental health providers and trained de-escalation officers to all mental health or domestic violence crises. Many people believe that cops should no longer respond to traffic calls at all or be replaced by a community member, or if they do, standard traffic cops should not have guns.
Another potential solution is offering more police training overall, including physical training, de-escalation training, and sensitivity training. They should be involved in training programs similar to like what we see in other countries.
We should hold the police accountable for their actions. Police officers shouldn't keep getting away with murdering or mutilating people. They need to be fired and prevented from being rehired at other departments because many of them can simply get another job in a different police station. They need to be held accountable by the law as well. Murder should mean jail.
Going off of that, we really need to lower the standard of proof for Department of Justice civil rights investigations of police officers. So right now, it's really hard to prove that a police officer committed an act of brutality, and that should be changed. Many people have also proposed using police funding or police pension funds to settle police brutality lawsuits. This would save taxpayers money because this money would just come out of police funding, and it's a huge incentive for police to be on their best behavior.
Unless the police are in a immediate danger from a gun, attempt to disarm, de-escalate, or restrain rather than kill or mutilate, if police must shoot, they should not shoot to kill as they do.
We
They
really need
require independent investigations of all cases where police kill or seriously injure civilians.
In many countries, police just disarm people who have knives without shooting them. Police in the United Kingdom encounter knife attacks at a similar rate to US police, but they handle these situations without using firearms. United Kingdom police used firearms against people with knives in 3 cases in 2020, whereas in the United States, almost 200 people with knives were killed by police.
Consistent with international law, police in the UK are prohibited from using firearms except where strictly necessary after considering nonviolent and less lethal options. Law in most US states do not require police to exhaust all available alternatives prior to using deadly force.
So another course of action that we could do is making all deadly practices illegal, such as shooting at moving cars, certain restraining positions, and making it illegal for police to even draw their guns unnecessarily. They also need to follow the Geneva Convention and stop using tear gas and rubber bullets.
Another solution is regular mental health evaluations for the police, removing police officers that seem mentally unwell.
Another potential solution is defunding the police. This sounds somewhat scary, but really it just means taking away excessive police funding. This will give them less money to work with for settling lawsuits and allow them to purchase less military-grade weaponry. Military-grade weaponry should not be used on civilians. Police departments should be more thoroughly regulated when it comes to the weapons they purchase and what they use. Defunding the police can demilitarize the police and therefore make them less oppressive to citizens. And it can also reallocate funding to new systems for traffic control and mental health responders, like we talked about before.
Another possible solution is abolishing the police altogether and rebuilding from the ground up.
A lot of people like to say that they don't want to support the cause against police brutality because Black Lives Matter protests were violent. And they choose not to support this cause specifically because of that. However, I want to make it clear that when I was in Black Lives Matter protests in Denver, Colorado, from my experience, police instigated every single action of violence that I witnessed. Pretty much the entire time protesters were running away from police, and they started firing upon us for no reason without provocation, at least from my experience. And studies actually show this too. Studies found that 93% of Black Lives Matter protesters were peaceful. And even if they were violent, that doesn't invalidate the cause against police brutality. Even if people were insanely violent during protests, it is still not okay for police to brutalize and oppress citizens.
To conclude this podcast, police brutality is a widespread issue in the U.S. with many victims. This issue is clearly severe and prominent and has many negative impacts on our society.
The police force historically has been racist and has been mobilized for racist purposes. This racist history was a lot more recent than people like to think, and no real reforms have been made since.
There is an overwhelming amount of evidence for the fact that police brutality vastly disproportionately impacts people of color. Now that we have an understanding of implicit bias, we can somewhat understand why this happens and how to consciously fix it.
And finally, this issue must be addressed in order to better society and improve our overall relations with the police. The way things are now is oppressive, and if you dislike overwhelming government control, you should be mad about this. Overall, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that this podcast opened up your mind a little bit to being critical of the police and their actions when they oppress citizens, especially when they're killing citizens. After this podcast, if you're interested in the issue of police brutality, consider looking into the Prison Policy Initiative, Black Lives Matter, or other advocacy groups in your area, and consider trying to help a little bit. Contact your representatives and tell them what you think about this issue. Attend protests if it's safe for you to do so. And overall, just go forward with this information and spread it as far as you can. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.